there a sense of motivation with you or your teammates that might be back next year?
For sure. I don't want to have a feeling like this again, but, you got to deal with it and, move on from it.
It's safe to say that Jayden Daniels had the greatest NFL rookie season of all time, and that's coming off of a year in 2023 when CJ Stroud had a phenomenal rookie year. And in this video, we're going to talk about how the Washington Commanders can take the next step. Despite the rookie year that CJ Stroud had in 2023, Jayden Daniels absolutely blew that out of the park in 2024, accounting for a total of 31 touchdowns, 25 passing, 6 rushing, only 9 interceptions, running for almost 900 rushing yards, and leading the Washington Commanders to the NFC Championship game. Before last season making it to the conference championship game, that was the first time the Commanders made it to that point since the 1991-92 season. I mean, 33 years, that's wild. But like I said, Jayden Daniels went crazy, and we're gonna see how he responds to that phenomenal rookie season in his sophomore season after winning the Offensive Rookie of the Year and being a Pro Bowler. We're gonna see, because now teams have expectations for him. They're gonna have film on him and things of that nature too. So we're gonna see how this team responds. But I like how things are trending for the Commanders in a season where no one expected him to have that type of success, and now they're building upon that. You see in the offseason, they traded for Laremy Tunsil from the Houston Texans, adding in a really good left tackle, one of the better left tackles in the league, to help protect Jayden Daniels, and adding in Deebo Samuel. I know a lot of people are making fun of this clip of him running at mandatory minicamp. That's kind of went a little viral, and I'm not going to say that he's in the best shape, I'm not going to lie, but I think he'll be utilizing the offense in a good way. But really my main thing for the Commanders right now, which I'm sure they'll get figured out for sure, but we all know that the Terry McLaurin holdout right now that's happening, and he deserves every single penny that he is waiting for. I mean, he's been on this Commanders team for 6 seasons, and he's played with quarterbacks like Taylor Heineke, Sam Howell. No disrespect to all those guys, but my point making that is that he's played with average to below average quarterback play and has still been one of the better 10 to 15 receivers in this league for the past few years, and he deserves that new contract extension for sure. And now having a franchise quarterback solidified at that position, now you want to make sure his number 1 target is there. So I'm sure they'll get that contract extension done, but it is a story for sure, and we see a lot of different holdouts happening around the league, like TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson, other players, and even a hold-in with Micah Parsons. I think all those deals though are going to inevitably get done. Even Trey Hendrickson at a point, we'll see. But moving things back to the Commanders though, I think an important thing to note as well too, I want to bring up how the Commanders can take the next step, is avoiding the whole sophomore slump type of thing. Because we saw with the Texans, for example, because I think it's perfect to use the CJ Stroud analogy, because like I said, prior to Jayden Daniels, he had the greatest rookie quarterback season in NFL history. We saw that team struggled last year, whether it was from offensive line issues, protections, penalties, lack of creativity on offense. All those things played a factor in CJ Stroud and the Texans getting rattled, and they still made the second round in the playoffs and lost to the Chiefs, and didn't really lose that bad either, lost in a respectable way. So that's saying something there. So even if the Commanders dipped off a little like that and still made it to the division round, I think that obviously that wouldn't be the next step, but that would still be not a super tail off from what they were. But to avoid that though, we're going to talk about in this video how they can continue to expand on the season that they had and take the next step, because the next step is for them not only to win an NFC Championship game, but to win the Super Bowl and try to get their 4th Super Bowl in franchise history. What the Commanders were able to do in the 2024 season, it's a testament to how Dan Quinn really implemented his culture on that franchise. And remember, in Atlanta, they almost won a Super Bowl. They were up 28-3 in that infamous game against the Patriots and obviously gave up that lead, but he was nearly a Super Bowl winning head coach, so he knows what it takes from a team building standpoint and just a coaching and pedigree standpoint to really create a team that breeds excellence and breed culture that can lead to winning. So that really goes without saying. And I think the offensive coordinator and Cliff Kingsbury, who was formerly the head coach for a few seasons of the Arizona Cardinals, he did an amazing job with Jayden Daniels, and him being back in a second season with Jayden Daniels, that's huge, because that's going to be able to have them build upon that successful season, have even further of a rapport. I would maybe expect if the Commanders have a great season and take that next step, or even just have a similar type of playoff run, winning a game or two in the playoffs, I would expect this to potentially be Cliff Kingsbury's last season as the coordinator there, because he might end up being a head coach somewhere else in 2026. But regardless of that though, with him being back this season with Jayden Daniels, that's just gonna hopefully unlock this offense even more and put them in great positions to flourish and be explosive and really make Jayden Daniels multiple, not only in the pocket, but we all know his amazing running ability as well too, being, I'll probably say, the second most dynamic running quarterback in this league after Lamar Jackson. The Commanders, they made a lot of good moves also in the draft too. I like them drafting Trey Amos in the 2nd round. He was for sure one of the best cornerbacks in this draft class. He's going to be a really good tough weapon for them in the secondary. And I also like in the 1st round, they drafted offensive tackle Josh Carnley out of Oregon. That helps provide some extra protection for Jayden Daniels as well too. I just really like the moves that this team is making, and really I can see the Commanders taking the next step, but also the counter argument to this as well too is if they'll take a step back. And I think either way is possible. I mean, anything is possible for sure. But I will say one thing though, if you've watched my 2 previous NFL season previews so far in this NFC East, of course, continuing after the Eagles and Cowboys, I talked about them, of course. And then after this Commanders video, we'll lastly talk about the Giants before moving on to the AFC East. I talked about how in this NFC East division, I'm continuing to bring it up on every single video for the NFC East. No team has repeated as division champs in 21 years. And I think that's going to continue to trend. So really, that's a favorable thing for the Commanders and for the Cowboys, in my opinion, too. Because I for sure think the Dallas Cowboys will be improved, so they have a good shot to win the division as well. I don't think the Giants would win. I think they'll be better, but I don't think they'll win it. So we'll see what happens there. But the counter argument to the Commanders taking the next step is also them taking a step back. So, and there's a lot of things, like I said, sophomore slumps, injuries, attrition, all types of things like that takes into account is whether your team is able to make another jump or take a little nosedive. And I'll expand on both possibilities in this video, but I think that regardless of the situation, Jayden Daniels, he's proven himself to for sure be a top 10 quarterback. I'm not ready to say top 5 because everyone was putting CJ Stroud in their top 5 last season. We saw what happened to him. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Jayden Daniels, but we have to get a little body of work before we put these quarterbacks into the upper echelon. I know Jayden Daniels, he had a great season. Shoot, if he would have made the Super Bowl, even won the Super Bowl in his rookie year, then I for sure would have been able to say, okay, he's a top 5 quarterback. But let's put him in the top 10 right now, and we'll see how much he ascends even more though. But like I said, we're going to talk about in this video how the Commanders can take the next step and ultimately what I do project their season to be for sure. Before we break down the Commanders even more, guys, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. You know we post videos here about the NBA, NFL, Marvel, DC, pop culture, all types of content and things like that. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Swaggy Russ, at TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for all types of short videos and things of that nature as well. And with that being said, let's talk about how the Washington Commanders can take the next step. So I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but the sophomore slump factor, I really think that that's definitely a factor, but I don't think it'll be as a prominent role or as a prominent thing that Jayden Daniels will have to deal with, because something I forgot to mention about in the intro is that he's a definition of poise. He even killed never too high or too low, and we see what he did in that playoff run. It was certainly spectacular. We can do by a game basis of it, but overall in his first postseason, Jayden Daniels had a 98 passing rating with 822 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and only 1 interception in those 3 games. And also along with that, he had 135 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown too. The game that stands out the most, so of course the Buccaneers one was really good, and we can talk about that some, but the game against the Lions, the #1 seed, that Lions team was heavily favored. A lot of people had them going to the Super Bowl, but the Commanders were really able to fizzle them out on the offensive end and also defensively too. But Jayden Daniels, he dominated, completed 22 out of his 31 passing attempts for 299 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, and having a 123 passing rating, also having 51 rushing yards, so having a combined 350 yards in that game. He just went crazy and leading to that 45-31 win over the Lions to lead them to their first NFC Championship game in 33 years. That was just really, I think, the epitome. And if you had to describe Jayden Daniels' rookie season in a game, I think that was the perfect example of how Jayden Daniels had an electric rookie season. And mind you, in that game against the Bucks in the wild card round, completed 24 out of his 35 passing attempts, throwing for 268 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm not really going to dive too deep into that Eagles game because we all knew the Eagles, they were just a juggernaut. That's going to be a hard team to play against, even though he did play against them relatively well in the regular season, and they split their matchups in the regular season too. That playoff, the Eagles were just hot, and that defense was one to be reckoned with and still is going to be really good this year. But like I said, Jayden Daniels, in terms of a slump standpoint, I really just don't foresee that happening too much. And the reason is because a lot of teams, especially against dual threat quarterbacks like a Jayden Daniels or, for example, a Jalen Hurts, a lot of the narrative has been, for example, for a Jalen Hurts is that he struggles against the blitz. And although he has improved in that area too, though, Jayden Daniels, he absolutely thrives off of the blitz. Let me give you some stats that he had against the Detroit Lions when they blitzed him. So he completed 12 of his 16 passing attempts for 191 passing yards and a touchdown when facing that blitz. His passer rating also against the blitz is 128.6, which is the highest among rookies since 2016. And he had a 90.3 QBR against the blitz, which was 3rd best in the NFL. So like I said, that blitz factor, that necessarily doesn't fare well for defenses going against a Jayden Daniels. It does against some dual threat quarterbacks, but against Jayden specifically, he thrives off of it because he can pick you apart in the pocket while also burning defenders in the running game as well too. It helps that he has a guy like, for example, Marcus Mariota, who was a top pick in the draft in 2015, who really fizzled out and has been a career backup, but that's a good veteran presence for him to learn off of. But also, like I said, his rapport with Cliff Kingsbury, who was really a quarterback whisperer, has helped really take that offense to the next level, and I think it'll be around the same in terms of that. And the only thing I would say I worry about the Commanders from an offensive perspective is the defenses that they'll have to play against in their division and just in the NFC beyond. But also, I mentioned Laremy Tunsil coming to that offense, and he is one of the better offensive linemen in the league. But one thing, at least being from the Houston area, I'm not a Texans fan. Don't get me wrong. I am not a Texans fan. Oh my gosh, I'm not. But watching the Texans a lot with Laremy Tunsil, he has so many false start calls, guys. Like, that's one thing that would definitely drive Commanders fans crazy and really be a deficiency for an offense that can be really improved and go off. Because I don't know if y'all remember that Monday Night Football game between the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Texans. On on the first play of the game. It was a 77-yard passing touchdown from CJ Stroud to Nico Collins. That got called back because it was an eligible man downfield call on Laremy Tunsil. So I know certainly Commanders fans do not want any type of that stuff happening because that's really a drive killer. He had a league leading 19 penalties in 2024, so certainly the Commanders will want him to clean up in that area for sure and be more disciplined. Those type of penalties and really just overall the offensive line play from the Texans, that kind of derailed things for Houston's offense being able to take another leap and have the success that they had in 2023 with CJ Stroud. But like I said, that team still made it to the divisional round, so in many ways it didn't kill them that much, but that's because their defense was really dominant, and I believe the Texans had like a top 5 defense. For the Commanders, I'm not necessarily sure I can say the same thing about their defense. Actually, I won't say the same thing about their defense, and don't get me wrong though, their defensive coordinator Joe Witt, he did a phenomenal job in the 2024 season, and Dan Quinn already being a defensive-minded head coach that he is, that really just complemented that defense well together. Some questions I have for sure about their defense is really stopping the run. From a total defense perspective, the Commanders ranked 13th in the NFL, and I think that was expected in terms of having a defensive-minded head coach, being in the top half of the defensive rankings. That's good for sure, but in terms of stopping the run in their run defense, it was a little bit lower because they ranked 17th overall, allowing over 23 rushing yards and giving up a total of 136 rushing yards per game. And they also struggled allowing nearly 6 yards per carry against teams as well too defensively. They allowed an average of 5 yards per carry on the right side, and on inside runs they are allowed an average of 4 yards per carry. So that's definitely not the type of stats you want from a run stop perspective, but with Dan Quinn, I don't know if y'all studied his scheme and stuff like that. This is to be expected. He was a defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, and they had problems during his tenure stopping the run. They were good from a pass rushing standpoint and being able to create turnovers in a passing game, but in terms of stopping the run, they were light, and that's just the type of defense that he runs. He likes quick agility guys, particularly at the linebacker position, and even as defensive tackles as well too. They're a little skinnier compared to other defenses where a lot of defenses have a lot more size and weight to help be run stoppers. That's not necessarily how Dan Quinn's defenses operate. They do have some really good veterans still on the squad though. They have Bobby Wagner, former Super Bowl champion, who really made a great impact to that Commanders defense last year, and they have Frankie Louvu, who was really good for that Commanders defense last year as well too. Mind you though, the Washington Commanders, they lost Dante Fowler Jr., who initially followed Dan Quinn to the Washington Commanders from Dallas, but now he's back in Dallas, and I'm not necessarily saying he's the best run stopper or anything like that, but he did contribute 10.5 sacks to the Washington Commanders pass rush last year, so you lost some pass rush ability to one of your divisional rivals, so that's something also to look at in terms of the Commanders defensive prowess as well. But there's still some concerns with their run defense in my opinion. I think that's going to be an emphasis for teams to see if the Commanders can truly stop the run in that way. They also made a move at the trade deadline last year, trading for Marshawn Lattimore from the Saints, which I think was a really good move, and like I mentioned in the intro, they drafted Trey Amos, who's another good corner who will help that room for sure. But from the run, man, that's where teams can really dictate their emphasis, and if you can't stop the run out the gate, teams are going to continue to force that issue every single snap and really just make things difficult and tire out your defense. And looking at their schedule, there's some teams who certainly will test that run defense against the Commanders. Some games to highlight specifically against teams that really operate at the run: week 2 against the Packers, Josh Jacobs had over 1,300 rushing yards last season in 2024 with the Packers. Then in week 3 they play against the Raiders. We all know Ashton Jeanty had one of the best running back seasons of all time in college. He's going to be a rookie, so it'll take him some time maybe to assimilate into playing in the NFL, but still, that's another team that will really operate in the running game with Pete Carroll being the head coach. That'll be a heavy emphasis there. Then they have week 4 playing against the Atlanta Falcons with Bijan Robinson, who was really dynamic in the running game, also as a pass catcher in the running game as well too. The Chargers, they run the football a lot. That's how they dictate things. The Bears too, having Ben Johnson as a first-year head coach, but we know how they played in Detroit, really letting the run game dictate how they operated in the play action. We'll see about the Cowboys, how their running game is too. The Seahawks, they have Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. The Lions, of course, like I said, they did play against the Lions really well though, so that's a different thing in there. And they have 2 different coordinators, so we'll see how they play, but that defense is going to be tested with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. The Dolphins too as well to an extent. We'll see how healthy Tua is, because really that dictates their season, to be honest. The Broncos as well. I mean, y'all just see the theme. I'm naming a ton of teams who operate off of a run first type of offense, who really just who operate off of a run first offense that helps open things up for their passing game, and those teams will for sure test the Commanders' run defense, not to mention them playing against the Eagles, of course, 2 times in their own division. They have a tough schedule, and I mentioned it in the Eagles video, but every single team in the NFC East, they have a top 10 strength of schedule, and the Commanders coming in at 8th. They have the 8th toughest schedule in the NFL. The teams that they're playing against, they have a total of a .550 winning percentage, so that's going to be certainly something to test them. So like I said, there's an argument for sure that this team could take a little step back, but what does a step back really mean for this team? Because they were 12-5 when a lot of people expected them last season realistically not to win maybe more than 5 to 7 games. Like I said, they were overachieved last year, so even if they went 11-6, or like I really predict them guys, which I'll expand on even more, to go 10-7, that's what I think they're going to be in a 2025 season, that's still probably good enough for them to make the playoffs this upcoming season. A lot will have to go right, and we'll see how other divisions and things like that go, because I talked about it a little bit earlier. I can see 3 teams from the NFC East making the playoffs in this 2025 season, but I don't think it's crazy at all to say that the Commanders will go 10-7. Jaden Daniels still playing good, but the team goes 10-7, still making the playoffs, but maybe struggling a little bit more than last year. And I think honestly that should be the expectation. With that though, as long as you get to the dance though, they showed you last year as a 6th seed, once you get into the playoffs, it's about who's playing the best football and who gets hot. And the Commanders, they were hot until they ran into Philadelphia, but they were hot. So as long as they get there, I don't even think the Commanders would concern themselves necessarily about them being a number 1, 2, or 3 overall seed. Of course, teams want to have home field advantage in the first round and even the second round and really the whole playoffs, but the Commanders showed that they can go on the road and play with the best of them and make a deep playoff run too. So I think that's what matters most for them, and that's what they prioritize for sure. But one way to combat not being able to stop the run is being able to run the ball yourselves, because at least if you're getting the ball run on you, you can try to control time of possession too, running the football as well too. And like I said, Jaden Daniels, he's probably the 2nd best running quarterback in the league after Lamar. And I would say Brian Robinson Jr., he's a solid running back. He's not necessarily one of the best, but he's certainly a solid back, because we all know in the current NFL game, the running back position, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, it's a very replaceable position, and you can lead a committee type of system. And we saw that a little bit with Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler last year. Last season in 2024, Brian Robinson Jr. had 187 carries for 799 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns. And then also Austin Eckler, he missed a little time with some injuries, but he had 77 carries for 367 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. And like I said, Jaden Daniels, he nearly had 900 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns too. So that helped really overall balance things in a way. But if you want to be able to make teams honest with them being able to stop your run game, you have to be multiple too as well. Brian Robertson Jr., he's 26 years old, so I think it's still safe to say that he's in his prime. But the other 2 running backs in that room, I don't necessarily know what they are, because Jeremy McNichols, he's 29 years old. We'll see how much action he really gets. And Austin Eckler, we all know that his prime was really in his days with the Chargers, and now he just turned 30 years old last month in May. So we'll see how effective their running game is. Like I said, Jaden Daniels, being a dynamic runner that he is, it's going to help open things up, but also at the same time, they're going to be facing light boxes as well too. So I think that could be something to monitor for sure. But really, from an offensive perspective, the penalties and the lack of a dynamic running game besides of Jaden Daniels is something for me to pause at a little bit. But I still think that being able to get the ball, the playmakers like a Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz, who was really good for them last season, even Deebo Samuel, I think that it's safe to expect him to be implemented in the running game to an extent. We'll see how effective he is. Like I said, he is looking a little bit older, but he still had some dynamic plays with the 49ers last year as well too. So I think he still has some good play left in the tank for sure, but we'll see about that. And even a guy like Luke McCaffrey, I think that he'll be even utilized a little bit more. We all know his dad, Ed McCaffrey, and of course his brother, Christian McCaffrey, 2023 Offensive Player of the Year. I think that he could be implemented into that offense very nicely as well too, along with Noah Brown, who was really good for the Commanders last year. We all know that catch that he had in the end zone against the Bears, that I think that really even just launched things up for the Commanders even more last season to really put them on a hot streak. But that's intriguing too. And also an intriguing player as well that they added, former Cowboys wide receiver Michael Gallup. We'll see how much he has left in the tank too, because he did retire, hasn't played I believe since the 2023 season, 29 years old. So we'll see how he's able to impact that offense. But hey, Jaden Daniels, he has some weapons to work with still for sure. And I think regardless of the situation, the Commanders are going to be in the playoffs. To the extent of how dominant they are, we will certainly see, because like I said, they have the 8th hardest schedule in the NFL. So something for sure does have to give. But how the Commanders can take the next step, it's simple. Not simple, but it is simple. Allow Jaden Daniels to continue to flourish, continue to control the line of scrimmage, and be himself. Don't limit him. Obviously, you want to keep him protected, and you don't want him to take unnecessary shots, get sacked, get hit too much to where defenses can wear him down and limit him. But just let him continue to flourish and play his game, because when he does that, when he's playing at a high level, being able to sit in the pocket, being able to scramble and improvise, this Commander team plays at a high level, and they play at a level that we're unexpected to seeing in this era. Because before this past season, the Commanders have been the definition of purgatory, one of those purgatory teams in the NFL. But this franchise really woke up a sleeping giant in the season that they had in 2024, and I think that they can take a next step in 2025. But I don't expect it to happen, because like I said, I think they're going to be 10-7 this upcoming year. But they still have the potential to make a deep playoff run, because in the midst of not winning a division, in the midst of maybe winning 1 or 2 less games in a season compared to the last one, I think that still isn't a bad season. I think that they can still maybe even make the Super Bowl. I mean, we've seen teams recently like the Bengals, for example, in the 2021-22 season, they were 10-7. They were a wild card. They got hot and they made the Super Bowl with a second-year quarterback. Does that sound familiar? Jaden Daniels, he's going to be a second-year quarterback. So that's even kind of comparable in that way too. And they had a #1 receiver, Ja'Marr Chase, who was a rookie at the time, but still, the Commanders have Terry McLaurin. They have Cliff Kingsbury. They have Dan Quinn, who's already been to a Super Bowl himself as a head coach, and also has a Super Bowl ring as a defensive coordinator with that Legion of Boom defense too as well. So this team, regardless of the situation, if they win the NFC East, if they're a wild card, whatever the situation or case of fact or the case is, I think that they're still going to make the playoffs. They have a tough schedule ahead for sure, but they're still going to flourish and do well. I think they'll take a slight step back. They can take a next step, but in my opinion, I think they'll take a slight step back, but not too much. Not saying that this team will go 9-8 or 8-9 and miss the playoffs. They'll go 10-7, I think. I could be wrong, like I said. They could be 11-6. They could be 12-5 like last year. Shoot, they could win the NFC East easily next season. I mean, we just never know because, like I said, injuries and attrition plays a huge factor in all of this because they have a major injury, then that really cuts everything out. Or if they're relatively healthy, that makes them even more dangerous. So I see this Commanders team making noise regardless of the factor situation. I think they'll go 10-7. They'll still be really good, maybe not as good record-wise, but they'll still be a prominent threat in the 2025 postseason and season overall. So yeah, guys, like I said, I'm sure Commanders fans are going to want to fight me, but I think they're going to make the playoffs. I think that they're going to finish third in the NFC East though. And I can see them taking the next step, but also the reality of the NFL is that teams adjust every single year and get more tape on you and find different ways to try to compromise your quarterback and make them more limited. So I just think not necessarily in a huge fashion we're going to see that, but I think that is going to be enough to a fashion where the Commanders aren't 12-5 like last season. I think that they'll be 10-7 and make the playoffs as a wild card again, but I just don't see them doing that again as well. And I think that the Cowboys will be improved. I think the Eagles will still be solid, but I can see the Commanders finishing second or third in NFC East, but still making the playoffs because it's very possible. I mean, a few seasons ago in 2022, the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Cowboys, and the Giants made the playoffs. So I can see the Commanders making the playoffs as well too, because that NFC East is one of the best divisions in football as well. So I see that for sure. But y'all let me know in the comments down below. Do you think that the Commanders are going to take another step this year, or do you kind of relate to me seeing them taking a little step back but still being good enough to make the playoffs? Y'all let me know down below. Yeah, y'all be blessed, guys. Like I said, you are loved. You are here for a reason, for a purpose. Jesus loves you. Remember that, guys. We're not here by an accident or mistake. So y'all keep being blessed. I'm grateful for y'all always. And yeah, stay tuned for more content. Let's get to 2,000 subscribers here ASAP. I know it's going to happen soon. So y'all be blessed and y'all have a good one.